Good evening and welcome to Four Corners. I'm Sarah Ferguson. Tonight has a generation been shut out of the great Australian dream. It used to be that Australians would spend 3 or 4 times their annual income on a house. Now it's 10, 20, even 30 times, putting home ownership out of reach for many, and especially for young people. The tax breaks that have helped fuel the unprecedented housing boom will be a big issue in the coming election campaign. Taken together, negative gearing and capital gains tax breaks cost the public purse an estimated $11.7 billion each year. Labor has promised to wind back the concessions, but despite criticism of negative gearing from some Liberal politicians, including former Treasurer Joe Hockey, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has ruled out any changes to the system. In tonight's programme, experts say that Australia's housing market is already cooling. Economists are divided over whether we're seeing the start of a soft landing, a correction or a crash. For many in the millennial generation, a crash is what they're waiting and hoping for. Ben Knight reports.
Well, this is the first shot we're filming for this story, and we haven't had to go very far because this is my street in Melbourne, and the house next door is about to go to auction.
After 8 years living overseas, I've come home to find the great Australian obsession with real estate is raging more strongly than ever. And I've discovered that I'm not immune.
Feels a bit awkward, actually. Looking at my neighbour's bathroom.
Watching house prices climb ever higher is practically a national sport.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If I may have your attention, please.
Back in 2000, when I was first looking, you could buy a house like this here for under 400 grand.
We'll start proceedings, ladies and gentlemen, and we will start it at $1.1 million, ladies and gentlemen. The bid's with us at 1.1, the rise. At 1.1...
If I was in my 20s and starting out now, this suburb would be out of my reach.
The bid, 110, fast! 20, 30, 20 I have.
So it's not hard for me to put myself in the shoes of the young guy who wants this house.
70 I have, 75. 70 the bid, 75, 1.170. It's only money.
But he's quickly blown out of the water.
$1,240,000 and selling. Are you sure? Gone, sold. Congratulations on your purchase here this afternoon.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Ben.
We're going to be neighbours.
Oh, no.
Time to meet my new neighbour.
Look, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit fussy on property. Yeah, it takes me a long time to find something that I want to buy.
Rob has bought and sold 2 houses before this.
I think for the people in the future it's going to be very hard, but I think this happens in all cities. It's just the way of the world. Things get very expensive.
They certainly have in Australia, especially in our 2 biggest cities. But while property prices have shot up, wages have barely moved. That's why in 2014, the International Monetary Fund ranked Australia as the 3rd most expensive country in the world to buy property. In Melbourne, the median house price is now more than $700,000. That's around 10 times the average wage. But of course, the place where prices have really gone into the stratosphere is here. There are parts of Sydney where property's more expensive than it is in Manhattan.
Welcome. Nice to meet you.
This apartment in Potts Point isn't much bigger than a 2-car garage.
We're hoping to get around the mid-sevens, if not more, for our vendors.
Mid-$700,000?
Yes.
Over $700,000 for 40
square metres, yes.
Around the corner, this terrace house just set a new record price. The median price for all of Sydney is a tick under $1 million. And the closer you get to the city, the more outlandish the prices become. North Sydney, $1.8 million. Neutral Bay, $2.3 million. Vaucluse, $4 million. Centennial Park, $5.4 million. Point Piper, median price, $14 million. Since the end of the mining boom, construction and mortgage debt are now the two biggest drivers of the Australian economy, and you can really get a sense of it from up here. But the high prices go well beyond the harbourside suburbs. In fact, they go all the way out to Sydney's Western Rim. The drive to Kellyville can take more than an hour at peak hour, more if the traffic's really bad. It might be out on the edge of the city, but Doug Driscoll's been doing very well selling property here.
Go, Doug.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very good indeed, thank you.
So this is Kellyville?
Kellyville, absolutely. You're paying anywhere from about 800,000 all the way up through to about $1.25 million.
He says the last 2 years have seen a once-in-a-lifetime property boom.
I mean, something would go on the market and literally within hours there would be, dozens of inquiries.
Because by Sydney standards, this area is vaguely affordable. Closer to town, forget it.
This is Strathfield, sort of middle ring, middle-class suburb of Sydney. And this is your classic three-bedroom family home on the good old quarter-acre block. Now, it's on the market for $2.2 million, although it'll probably go for more. But that means it is right on the median house price for this suburb. But the median income for this suburb is $76,000. So that means that this suburb has a price-to-income ratio of 29. In simple terms, it means that it takes 29 years using every cent of the median salary to buy a house like this. And that's before tax.
The ageing population is people coming of age.
This is now the biggest housing boom in Australia's history. And property is the new gold rush.
So now is the time to make a move. Get in quickly when the door is open, because the door will shut very, very quickly.
On a Thursday night in an outer suburb of Melbourne, property salesman Ron Cross is selling the investment dream.
It doesn't matter if it doesn't go up in value, but it will, because you've got this massive cash flow. Why are people looking at negative gearing? Because it is generous. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to become involved in property investment. It's a gift. So the secret is to borrow money. So the young people in the audience tonight, don't be fearful of borrowing money. Thank you so much.
And his message has hit home.
Get into property as soon as you can.
Whether you should buy your home first or your investment property, and he said definitely buy an investment property. That's something that's very interesting.
It's probably in my interest to start looking at investing my own money, yeah.
But one of the young people in the audience isn't convinced. Jules McKendry thought she was coming here to get advice on how to buy a home.
I don't think they give you a great idea of what you're coming down to. So my partner and I are looking to buy an already established house. So we're not looking to buy an investment property. We want a house we can live in.
Jules McKendry has spent the last year trying to buy her first home.
Jules, how are you?
Good.
All right. So you're back at it.
Yeah.
Jules isn't from a wealthy family. Her parents don't even own a house.
No, absolutely.
But at 25, she's managed to save $150,000 from her marketing job and by boarding with her mum.
I wouldn't have thought that with the amount of savings I've got and the money I earn and the sort of the lifestyle I'm in, I wouldn't have thought I would be so far away from buying a house.
Do you think that for your generation that's something that just might not be a reality anymore?
If the prices keep doing what they're doing now, there's no way my kids will own houses. To them it will be normal because no one will own houses.
But you
no one will buy them.
But you feel ripped off.
Oh, definitely.
Jules McKendry spends every weekend looking at houses, while her partner Nathan is at work helping to build up their deposit.
It really kills your weekend, doesn't it?
Oh, it's pretty much a full-time job. Like, other than what I do for work, this is what I do now. How you going?
Good morning, welcome.
Okay.
I'm Chris.
Hey, Chris. Ben.
Thank
How you
you.
doing?
10 years ago, their savings would have paid half the cost of a house like this. Not anymore. But Jules knows what she wants.
I love the big windows. I love the fact that you can see all the green outside. So that obviously really attracts me when buying a property. This wall here is the walk-in robe for that bedroom. I would knock that out.
Okay.
There's a spa out there, so there's a spa in your front yard. There's no way I would keep that. But this I love. Like, you can't complain when you've got this much backyard at all. I want to be able to kick a footy around in the backyard, you know, on Australia Day, set up, you know, a cricket game, whatever, like, however it be.
You're talking about the great Australian dream.
Exactly right, yeah.
You totally subscribe to that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, it is a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom.
This house in Kilsyth is 40 kilometres from Melbourne's CBD, but it's a lot closer to town than most people her age could even consider. How many houses have you bid on?
To date, more than 20.
How do you find the emotional energy?
You can't get emotionally attached to houses anymore. You can look at them and go, I could see myself living here, but I can't be in love with it. I can't envision my furniture in it. I can't do any of that, because otherwise every week I'd just be going, yeah, no, and you can't do that. Like, you can't live your life being depressed every weekend because you've missed out on another house.
Her competition isn't other home buyers, it's investors. It'll be the same with this property.
I think if we won't purchase this house, or a young couple doesn't purchase this house, I think less than 2 years from now there'll be a house in the backyard.
Right, so you're thinking that this is who you're up against. You're up against an investor
100%.
who just wants to subdivide.
Yeah, exactly right.
And so have you lost out on auctions to investors before?
Oh, 100%, yes.
This map of Melbourne shows the suburbs where more than half of the units are owned by investors.
It appears that the investor, the opportunistic investor, buoyed by low interest rates, has dominated the market. And so first home buyers have really been unable to compete.
John Alexander is the Liberal member for Bennelong in Sydney's inner northwest. He chaired the Parliament's inquiry into housing affordability, which is due to report this year. Do you think we're seeing an entrenchment of a generational wealth divide in Australia?
Well, I think this is a great concern, and this is what personally drove this inquiry, because I have 3 children who would love to buy a home someday. And every person I've ever door knocked in this region has the same concern. And so how do you give people the opportunity to buy homes?
People like Jules. Her generation is known as the millennials, those who were born from the 1980s onward. They have a reputation as the selfie generation, narcissistic, entitled, the kids who got a trophy just for turning up. But they've turned up too late to catch the housing boom. John Daly from the Grattan Institute wrote the book on the generational divide in Australia.
They're finding it clearly a lot harder to get into the housing market. 25 to 34-year-olds used to be about 60% owned a house, now it's less than half.
The widening gap between house prices and wages has effectively shut millennials out of the housing market.
Their choice is pretty stark. They either purchase on the edge with all of the problems that creates in terms of poor access to jobs, or essentially they wind up, if they're lucky, buying an apartment in the centre, or more likely renting.
But their parents' generation wants millennials to know that they didn't have it easy either.
You don't start with a big TV, you don't start with the best car, you don't start with the best clothes.
Yes, I have my own house, but it's 40 years of work.
My husband and I were paying up to 18% interest during the 90s. You have your own challenges.
You can't always have what you want, when you want it, where you want it.
It's not the same. The market now is not what the market was when the baby boomers were buying. You know, everything's different.
I think the kitchen's beautiful, Molly. Don't you?
Yes, well, this is what I'm interested in, a kitchen. You need a big kitchen, drawers and cupboards. Oh, yes, you've got everything. Yes, this is all you need in here.
Now, if you can tell me what sort of money you have in cash, we could go up to £800.
It was under Robert Menzies that home ownership took off in Australia as an aspiration and a reality. In 1947, less than 50% of Australians owned or were buying a house. Just over a decade later, that figure had jumped to 70%.
This is the preoccupation on any Sunday afternoon for tens of thousands of people across Australia.
As the suburbs sprouted, we rushed into them. As the population kept growing, so did demand, especially in Sydney and in Melbourne. Especially from investors.
Wayne, there's one in Greystanes.
Oh, great.
In Sydney.
Karen and Wayne Phillip aren't big earners. She's a therapist, he's a retired teacher.
G'day. Hi, how you going?
Good, Wayne, is it?
Yeah, mate.
Since they married 12 years ago, they've turned $100,000 into a $4.5 million property portfolio. And they've done it all from the dining room of their home on the New South Wales Central Coast.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure.
So where's this one?
This one's in Newcastle. We purchased that 3 years ago. We purchased that, I think, for $325, did a little work on it. We had it valued recently for just over $500.
So that's done very well for you.
Yes, yeah, it has. This was one of the first little ones I bought.
It's a simple formula. Borrow money, buy a property, rent it out, and then sell at a profit. And they're very good at it.
We purchased it for $260 and sold it for $360 3 years later.
It is horrifically ugly. How did you choose it?
Not an emotion.
No, we don't ever buy an
Logic.
emotion. It's a house that we probably never live in. This one...
This is how you ride a housing boom.
Coffs Harbour, yes. But when we started, not only did we not see the places that we were buying because we saw them on the internet, we actually borrowed 105% using the equity we had in our house to fund that.
And just kept revaluing the ones and borrowing against those and borrowing against those.
Exactly right.
So how many houses have you bought and sold in all that time?
Well, 18.
Yeah, about 18.
Yes.
We started
That's
buying...
like Monopoly figures.
I mean, when you think back on it, you think, wow, how we ever even do that?
But you couldn't have done it without negative gearing?
No.
You're surprised more people don't do it?
I am.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
very surprised that they don't do it, but I don't think they know how to do it.
To put it simply, negative gearing is a clever way of reducing your tax bill. If you have an investment property and it's losing money, you can claim that loss as a tax deduction against everything else you earn. Other countries do it too, but they're far less generous with their allowances. In 1985, then Treasurer Paul Keating called negative gearing an outrageous rort and tightened the rules. But 2 years later, his decision was blamed for rising rents in Sydney. And with a New South Wales state election looming, the federal cabinet brought negative gearing back. Then, in 1999, the deal got even sweeter when the Howard government halved capital gains tax. That meant investors could afford to lose even more money on the rent, claim it on their tax, then watch the property go up in value and cash in by selling. And you can see it taking effect. From 1999, owning property turned from a profit-making operation for investors into a massive loser for the government, taking billions each year out of the budget. And each year, more and more investors jumped in.
We're travelling towards a market that's dominated by speculative investors and excluding the home buyer. And too often it's the young couple who get beaten out at the auction is then renting that very place that they were trying to buy. And so...
In this development, in John Alexander's electorate, investors own more than 25% of the buildings. The developer says that's low by their standards. Most schemes like this are more than 50% investor-owned.
Negative gearing has worked very well when it has provided affordable rental properties. The moment that it intrudes on the marketplace and stops young families from buying the house, that's not ideal. And that's what's happened in this moment when interest rates have gotten so low. So it's this new dynamic that's come into play that has deprived young people of being able to buy homes and has really created this spike.
No, we don't believe it has had a role in pushing up prices. It's not been the dominant part of the market.
It's been a fascinating process. The Property Council of Australia is a big supporter of negative gearing.
No, the big factor pushing up prices has been the chronic undersupply of housing for well over a decade and the failure of that supply pipeline to match our growing cities and our growing population.
Property builds Australia's economy. It's our biggest industry.
The Property Council has launched a campaign to keep negative gearing.
If politicians play with negative gearing, all this will be at risk. Property is no game. Don't play with negative gearing.
Ever since the Hawke government's backed out on negative gearing in 1987, neither side of politics has been willing to go near it, at least not while in office.
We must increase...
In his farewell speech to Parliament in October, the former Treasurer Joe Hockey stunned his colleagues with some parting thoughts.
Negative gearing should be skewed towards new housing so there is an incentive to add to the housing stock rather than an incentive to speculate on existing property.
Good to see you. Thank you. 4 months later, Labor announced its policy to do just that.
Investors are now 50% of all home purchases. That's the highest that it's ever been. Guess what? There's a link. There's a correlation. What we've got to do is level the playing field. First home buyers are turning up at auctions with no government support. Investors are turning up at auctions with the negative gearing policy in one pocket, with the capital gains tax discount in the other. And of course, investors are outbidding first home buyers.
You don't need to be a professor of economics.
As soon as Labor announced its policy, the government was on the offensive.
What does the Labor Party want to do? It wants to give the property market a kick in the guts. It wants to send those prices lower. It's going to be a pretty hard slog, I would say, defending a policy that has got vote Labor and be poorer. That's what that'll be. This vote Labor and see your house price go down. That's what Labor's offering. Lower house prices, poorer Australians.
The Prime Minister's time has expired.
The Prime Minister has been under attack over the government's tax policy.
But the coalition muddled its message early when the Assistant Treasurer said it would send house prices up.
They've got a policy that is going to increase the cost of housing for all Australians, for those people who currently own a home and for those people who would like to get into the housing market through their negative gearing policy.
The PM quickly pulled Kelly O'Dwyer into line.
I can only assume that the Minister was referring to new housing, which of course is a very small percentage of the housing stock.
It's up to prudent government action, and certainly not the rash proposal of the Labor Party to suggest that you'll only give negative gearing to new home construction, because that would just devastate the housing market. That would create a free fall. That would be devastating.
Absolute rubbish. It's just a scare campaign, and what we need to do is look at policies which really do make a difference on housing affordability. But to claim that this would devastate, as John Alexander says, and that's the Liberal Party talking points, is just a completely fallacious argument.
John Daly says Labor's change would probably push house prices down, but not as much as the government claims.
Chances are we would see property prices fall a little bit relative to where they would be otherwise, maybe 2%. So it's not a big change in the scheme of things. And at the margins, we would see slightly fewer investors and slightly more homeowners.
Now, it is true that negative gearing, Mr Speaker...
The current Treasurer, Scott Morrison, says Labor's latest attempt to change negative gearing is the politics of envy.
But what they don't understand, Mr Speaker, is ordinary Australians, mums and dads, are the ones who invest in negative gearing, Mr Speaker. 2/3 of those who engage in negative gearing have a taxable income of $80,000 or less, Mr Speaker.
One reason for that is that there are millions more people in that lower tax bracket than there are in the ones above it. But some recent figures from the Grattan Institute show that it's the top 10% of income earners who are getting 50% of the benefit from negative gearing. It's why some Liberal elders support Labor's policy of winding it back.
In fact, our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, once described negative gearing as tax fraud. And in many cases he's right.
Actually, what Malcolm Turnbull called negative gearing was tax avoidance in a speech in 2005.
I don't quite understand why he's now arguing against the proposition he put out before and supporting Labor. And I'm sure if Labor hadn't have introduced a policy on negative gearing, the Conservatives would have, which is the great disappointment of politics today.
Why has the Prime Minister changed his view?
Well, I think there's a very simple reason. It's all about winning the next election.
It's a big fail from those opposite because they don't get it, Mr Speaker.
While the politicians argue, young homebuyers wait for something to change. Extreme circumstances call for extreme measures, like moving back in with your parents.
Hello.
Hey, Jerry, how are you?
Good, thanks, Ben. How are you? Yeah, welcome. Come in.
Thank you. Jerry and Libby Holmes have a full house once again, ever since their daughter Millie moved back in and brought her new family with her. So you must be Millie?
Yeah.
You're Ben?
Yeah. Mrs. Daisy.
Daisy.
Yeah.
He's a paramedic, she's a psychologist.
Finishing school, we knew we had a HECS debt. We knew we had to have a pretty good job to be able to then save a deposit. I guess we probably just didn't realise it was going to be this hard.
Even renting is it's really expensive, so you can't sort of save and rent at the same time.
We love it.
Do you retreat in here?
Yeah. We have our little domain.
They're all now living in the room Millie slept in as a teenager.
Yeah, we've got lots of space. We can't complain.
There are now 6 adults and 1 baby under one roof. But no one here is complaining.
Yeah, well, as I said before, it's a blessing to be able to have the whole family in the one house and the 3 generations as well. It's a really exceptional experience that I know Libby and I are really enjoying.
We'll just try and put away as much money as we can and then see where we're at, hopefully when this bubble bursts.
We'll get there.
So for you, that would be a good thing.
For us, it would be. Of course. It would be
Look
for
at
us.
our smiles.
Maybe not.
Millie and Ben aren't the only ones who think there's a housing bubble.
It's a bubble. It's a Ponzi scheme. Like all Ponzi schemes, or like all bubbles, it's driven by people taking out debt.
Steve Keane has predicted a crash before, and he's been spectacularly wrong.
I love the look of the balloons.
In 2010, he walked from Canberra to Mount Kosciuszko after losing a bet that Australian house prices would fall by up to 40%. He says the only thing he got wrong was the timing.
So we've actually managed to keep it going, but we've only done it by boosting our mortgage debt to the highest level in the Western world.
To a record $1.5 trillion. Mortgage debt is now equivalent in value to 94% of Australia's GDP. Australian banks are more exposed to the mortgage market than in any other country. John Alexander also compares the housing market here to a Ponzi scheme.
A Ponzi scheme is based on that there will be new people coming into the market all the time, willing to buy. That it's solely based on the fact that the market will always go up. Well, that's what investors who are borrowing at 100% are relying on.
As a visual metaphor, it's probably a bit clunky. But the point about a Ponzi scheme is, once everyone stops buying in, it all comes crashing down.
Well, our feeling is that there's definitely been a property bubble developing in Australia.
Amy Reynolds is a strategist with a Singapore-based capital fund. It's one of the funds that's shorting Australia's banks, a multi-million-dollar stock market play betting that Australia's banking sector is headed for a fall from its exposure to the mortgage market.
According to pretty much any housing market indicator you want to look at, house prices in Australia are significantly overvalued, and we see it as having deviated from normal values and long-term averages by about 40%. So we're expecting this kind of fall to take place in the housing market. Then we've got things like...
She's talking about indicators like the price-to-rent ratio, debt to GDP, the proportion of investor loans, at levels close to or above where they were in other countries before their housing markets collapsed. Most of all, the price-to-income ratio, the gulf between what houses cost and what people actually earn. In Ireland, the price-to-income ratio was 8 just before its housing market collapsed. In the US, it was 5. In Sydney, it's now 12.2 times the median salary. In Melbourne, it's almost 10. But John Daly says the Australian market is different.
We have a rapidly growing population. That means that there's this underpinned demand for housing that, say, for example, Spain did not have. We also have a much better regulatory system, and if you look at the fundamentals in terms of how much you have to pay to buy into the housing market, given current interest rates, it doesn't look wildly out of kilter with the past, so long as interest rates don't go up, and that's the big if.
But last month, The Economist magazine also calculated that Australia's housing market was overvalued by 40%. The OECD has warned of a sharp correction.
Over the past year, Sydney house prices gained more than 14%, Melbourne just over 8%.
Last year, Treasury Secretary John Fraser was warning of a bubble in parts of Sydney and Melbourne.
Certainly, I think the case in the higher priced areas of Melbourne.
It's a bubble. It's a glut as well.
It's in Melbourne. You can see the bubble before your eyes in the explosion of high-rise apartments, fuelled by investment that buyers advocate Catherine Cashmore says are largely empty.
I've walked through so many buildings where there have been a large number of empty apartments, and it's clear that people are buying them and they're not interested in renting them out. And it does seem counterintuitive, but the rents, the yields in Melbourne are so low.
It's really only when you get up to this kind of height that you get a sense of just how incredible the scale of building has been, especially here in Melbourne. And the numbers are phenomenal. Melbourne has added around 13,000 new apartments each year for the last 2 years that have lost value before anyone even turned a key in the lock. Now, in the next 2 years, that figure is going to rise to 22,000 apartments. It's a hell of a lot in a market that's already saturated.
Take a look over there. There's your office block. And over here, these are the apartments that you can see that there's no lights on. There's only a handful of properties in here where the lights are on. And this is the evidence that's showing, really, that the lights are off and nobody's home.
I mean, that's significant because it's 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. We're so close to the CBD of Melbourne that if anyone was going to be home, they'd be off that tram now, but they're not. It's basically empty.
That's right. These properties are not fully occupied. They are vacant.
It wasn't supposed to be this way. The state government's planning blueprints for both Sydney and Melbourne assumed that empty nesters would downsize into apartments and leave their houses in the suburbs behind, opening them up for young homebuyers. But the empty nesters aren't coming.
We're still building units that, to be quite honest, you wouldn't put your dog in. I mean, some of these one-bedroom vertical fridges are appalling, and I couldn't imagine anything worse. That's why I'm so opposed to downsizing.
There could be lots of developers who end up being unable to sell their off-the-plan properties and going bankrupt.
I think we're in for a crunch. There's no doubt about that at all.
So we fought hard for this.
Yet still people are banging down the door to get into the market.
See what happens if you stick to your guns.
Liz Moss has just signed the paperwork on her third investment property on the outskirts of Melbourne.
Yeah, I just started my third investment property. Just signed the paperwork for it.
She now owes the bank more than $1 million.
540, 290, and I'm not really good with maths all in my head, but just over, 1.2, something like that? Does that sound about right? Altogether? Yeah.
I'll go downstairs. We'll be back in a sec. But
okay. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Like Karen and Wayne, Liz Moss isn't a big earner.
I don't really want to just buy property for the sake of it. I have to. And the only reason I'm putting everything into property because it really is the only way for me to set something up for my future. I've worked in commission sales a lot, and so I don't have a lot of superannuation. Unless I have some sort of assets behind me, by the time I retire, I'm not going to have anything just absolutely nothing to live on because obviously the pensions are going and all that sort of thing.
Salesman Bruce Lewis says out here he's inundated with buyers who he knows are stretching themselves to the limit.
A lot of people will come in and go, the bank will give us this much. And as a salesperson, I probably should say that thanks very much, but generally what you find yourself doing is going, you should maybe downsize, allow for the rainy day, one income. But the kids come in and whatever they can borrow, they'll generally do, which is pretty scary. So,
well, it is because
if interest rates go up, they don't make those allowances. So,
how far do you think interest rates would have to move before we see real problems?
Wouldn't be much. I'd say 1% would probably hurt a lot of people. Yeah.
And consumer activists say banks and brokers have also been signing people up for mortgages they can never afford without their knowledge.
There's a lot of evidence that we've come across that banks are actually fudging the loan application forms of borrowers to make them look a lot more creditworthy than what they really are.
Economist Lindsay David has presented more than 1,100 examples of altered loan forms to the Parliament. He says it shows that banks are engaged in predatory, even fraudulent lending.
The banks are actually literally using liquid paper or other types of ways to clear out the income of a loan applicant and raise it. They're lending to home buyers that have no ability to be able to pay off their loan, and they're basically depending on the property market to continue to rise at a consistent rate.
And we didn't have to go too far to find someone who'd had their loan application changed by a bank.
And that's all from The Business. I'm Elise Morgan. Thanks for watching.
When ABC Business reporter Elise Morgan got her loan documents back from the Commonwealth Bank, she found something wasn't right.
So what did you spot?
Oh, we spotted that my income had been massively inflated to what it normally is. There's a line that says your monthly income. It was correct for my husband's. And then for mine, it was inflated by around 38%.
She says she never found out who changed the figures on her loan application.
What were they thinking trying this? Not just on any member of the public, but an ABC business journalist.
As a business journalist, you have to think to yourself, what's in the interest of the organisation or the institution to pump that up? I'm on a pretty good salary, so you've only got to think to yourself, are they taking it from, say, a AA to a AAA rating? Is it more convenient for them to have those sorts of figures? I don't know.
Which is exactly what Lindsay David says is going on.
If the banks show the international investment community that they're lending to very, very credible borrowers, creditworthy borrowers, then it's very, very easy for the banks to tap into very cheap debt and to be able to sell off residential mortgage-backed securities with a AAA rating. For one reason or another, our politicians do not want to touch this. ASIC does not want to touch this. And basically, that is a serious problem because we know that the mortgage market in this country is contaminated with junk debt.
Bank behaviour is now firmly in the spotlight. The government has restored more than $120 million of funding to the corporate watchdog ASIC, and the Prime Minister has warned the banks to lift their game. Last year, the banking regulator APRA finally acted to rein in bank lending to investors, limiting loans to 80% of a property's value and making it harder for people to qualify. That change has undoubtedly slowed the market down. House prices in Sydney have dropped for the second straight quarter. Melbourne is still rising, but at just over 1%.
This is the beginning of things calming, which is a good thing.
Our feeling is that it's kind of too little too late. There's too much debt, there's too much exposure, there's too much vulnerability. We think the banks will be shaken by this, yeah.
Here's what the great Australian dream looks like in 2016.
This is Mernda on the outskirts of Melbourne, or what's currently the outskirts of Melbourne. It's about 30 kilometres from the CBD, but if you're commuting, it's more like 2 hours in and 2 hours back out again at peak hour. And people do it. In the last 5 years, the median house price here has doubled. It's now more than $400,000. And one of the things that's pushed the prices up is because in these outer growth suburbs, people who are looking to buy a home are more than anywhere else competing against investors. Around a third of the houses and more than half of the units are being bought by people who will probably never live in them.
You can still get a house and land for $300,000 or $400,000, but you're not getting much. Houses are squeezed onto ever-shrinking blocks of land. The rental units are even smaller.
I mean, they're tiny, mate, you know. Like, I rented down there and, I mean, you can basically hear your neighbours coughing. That's how close the houses are these days. And it was jammed in here.
Andrew Kyriaku's just bought his first house,
Some of my corners have got bubbles in them.
but spends his weekends fixing up the builder's mistakes.
Doesn't make sense. What did I pay for? I mean, I just bought a brand new home. I'm fixing a brand new home. All these builders, they don't care. They make their money. They don't care about us. It's like we're scrapped, mate. You know, our kids, I feel sorry for my kids. By the time they get older, the houses are going to be, God knows how much the houses are going to be.
Jules McKendry is hoping today's the day she buys her first home.
Got the checkbook?
Yes, of course.
Good girl.
She's back at the house in Kilsyth for auction day.
Okay, and how short does it fall?
It's been quoted in the high $400,000 range, but no one believes it'll sell for that.
So what's your limit?
Probably 559.
559.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very specific.
Yeah, well, you have to be because you need to know your limits and you need to not go over it and, you know, just under 560. That way it's not, you know, just over 560. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, you know how it works in your head.
I'm now in your hands. Fair and opening bid. Folks, I'm in your hands.
And it's Jules who gets things going.
500?
At 500, welcome to the bidding.
It's moving quickly.
510 I have, straight back at 520. At 510, 520, 530. 520 on the left. 520 on the left, 530 if you will. 530 I have, 540 on the nod. 550 there, come back at 560, same opportunity, 550.
To stay in, Jules will have to go over her limit.
At 560,000 now in the middle. First call, 560.
And that's it. Blown out of the water in less than a minute.
We are selling on
the final hammer. Jules is more than 30 grand short.
Going. We are selling. We are selling. We are sold at 592,000. Congratulations to the underbidders. Commiserations. Thank you for your bidding. Have a talk to the guys, and thank you for attending Stockdale Lego auction here today.
Took it up there pretty quickly, but it just kept going, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a big jump. So, I mean, it didn't surprise me. I sort of said that prior to, but...
And you knew you were up against, I think there were a few investors in the bidding there, weren't there?
Yeah, so the builder that was next to, up against the fence, he's a builder, and then the guy at the back was a builder as well.
And remember her prediction about this house.
I think if we won't purchase this house, or a young couple doesn't purchase this house, I think less than 2 years from now there'll be a house in the backyard. I can't help but notice when we got here you were measuring the driveway.
She was spot on.
We do have future, plan of subdivision and investment.
Well done, guys. Cheers.
But once again, you know, you've lost out to people who are here with a different agenda.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. Yeah, I suppose a little bit disappointed, a little upset, but, you know, I'll find the right one. Well, alternatively, I could just blow all my savings, go travel, but no, I'll keep at it.
I don't think you're going to do that.
No.
What do you do now?
Just keep looking.